Hi, my name is April Taylor. I'm a sustainability scientist here at the Climate Science Center. I'm a Chicka Foundation employee office here, which Renee talked about under the consortium, how it came to be. I want to take a minute and introduce a couple people. We have Kim Winton back here. If you didn't know, she is our tribal liaison for all 8 climate science centers. And so she plays an important role in our tribal engagement at the national level, as well as our climate science center here. So she's here, and then I have Kim Merriman. So we now have 2 Kims. Kim Merriman is back there as well. She is my new assistant. So we now have 2 full-time tribal liaisons here that work with the Chickasaw Nation at our office, and she just started on Thursday. So take time to introduce yourself and welcome her. So today I'll be talking about providing an introduction to our tribal partnerships and engagement. So first, a little bit about myself. I am a Chickasaw citizen. We have our Native American grafted upon in southeast Oklahoma. My background is I have my bachelor's from Texas A&M in marine science, and then I have my master's in earth and environmental resource management from the University of South Carolina. My background includes sand sources for beach nourishment, watershed planning, wetland mitigation, and ArcGIS, and things like that. Let me explain sort of what is my role here at the Climate Science Center and what do I do. The way I explain it is there's 2 different aspects to my job. One is developing relationships with the tribes, and then the second is developing opportunities for Indian educators and tribal students and things like that. So the way I do that primarily is, one is we develop trainings for tribal staff and building capacity for climate science. And then the second aspect is I sort of explain my position as a matchmaker. You have all the tribal staff and their interest in work they're doing, and then you have all the climate scientists, and I sort of bring them together for projects and things like that. And so I'll be talking about that. This is sort of my outline of what I'll be talking about. I'll be talking about the Climate Science Center and our tribal engagement and our plan that we've developed. And then I'll talk about a few of the CSC-funded tribal projects, and then I'll talk about some of the trainings and types of things that we're doing. So if you're not familiar, there are 68 tribes in our region of Oklahoma, New Mexico, Texas, and Louisiana. There are 39 in Oklahoma, and many of these tribes were relocated from other regions in the United States. So they had to adapt to different climates and different landscapes when they were relocated here. And then we have 23 tribes in New Mexico, and those tribes have historically lived there for hundreds and thousands of years. So they've been there and have adapted to different climates over long periods of time and are very rooted in their culture. There are 3 tribes in Texas, which you can't see on this map very well, but there's one in El Paso, there's one in Eagle Pass, and there's one in Livingston. And then we have 4 tribes in Louisiana as well that we work with. So we very early on started developing a tribal engagement plan for the Climate Science Center. It's almost finished. It's in the USGS publication process, and we hope to have it out hopefully this summer, is the last thing I heard. So I'm going to be talking about that. And basically what this document does is it outlines or gives us a strategy for our approach to develop relationships with tribes in our region. And it includes some of the things like this, providing educational opportunities for tribal staff and tribal leaders in climate science, promoting collaboration with tribal scientists and tribal leaders in the area of climate science and adaptation. And then, as I mentioned, providing educational opportunities for Indian educators and tribal students. And then it also includes resources such as a list of funding opportunities and resources for tribal projects. So first of all, how do we build climate science capacity for tribes? One of the types of things that we're working on is developing training, such as Climate 101 trainings for tribal staff. And then we also are developing, and we develop resources for tribal staff on different aspects of climate science. For instance, we last summer we developed drought histories for tribal staff. It also includes offering things such as structured decision making training, and then we also are looking at hosting tribal climate change trainings and bringing them to our region and to the tribal staff, things like that. Another aspect of the tribal engagement plan includes promoting the collaboration with tribal scientists and tribal leaders on climate change. And I just want to highlight that the position of my position and Kim is very important. It takes a lot of work. We have 68 tribes. I'm constantly developing something and getting emails and things. We have a large region. Again, we have Oklahoma, New Mexico, Texas, Louisiana, and so I'm constantly going somewhere and meeting with somebody, and so it's very important to have full-time staff working on this, and we have a very important role in engaging with the tribes in our region. As I showed the map, if you're not familiar, there's large land holdings from these tribes and things like that. So it's even though we're currently the only climate science center that has a full-time tribal liaison, it's a very important role to have with climate science centers. And then the other aspect of this is educating researchers, such as you guys, on appropriate tribal collaboration, on things like how do you build relationships with tribes and include them from the very early on and give them a chair at the table, you know, that they are important and they do have a role. It may be including things like, how many of you know what CTI training is? Yeah, that's training on ethics, on how to do research type things on social. If you're a social scientist, it's something that you're taught from very early on that you have to take, and so a lot of your natural environmental scientists aren't aware of that, and the appropriate ways to engage with human research. Another aspect is working with tribal IRB staff. So IRB is the Institutional Review Board. You may be familiar with this with your university, where in fact, many of the tribes have IRBs as well. So you have to go through their process and get approval in addition to your university IRB staff. And so that's one aspect that we work with. Educating researchers on buzzwords like traditional ecological knowledge. There are these words out there that are often tossed around and used, as we all know, with other words in our fields, but there are also tribal words that are of concern that you need to be aware of what that means and what the concerns are. And then also on propriety information. You know, the tribes have that right to not want to share every aspect of their information with you or to include things like that. So there are lots of things that we are working on there. And of course, the other aspect is providing educational opportunities for Indian educators and tribal students, such as internships, youth camps, tribal youth group, working with tribal youth groups and programs, and then working with Indian educators and workshops and providing resources to our teachers as well are some of the different aspects that we're working on. So to me, I think it's very important to engage with our next generation and educate them about climate science. To me, growing up, you know, I was lucky that I even heard the word, like Bill Bardish was saying, and Allison, you know, it's not something that we were taught, you know, and even in college, you may get it slapped onto your last final and say, okay, read this chapter, and you may get a couple questions, be prepared on climate change. And so they're the next generation. They're going to be the ones making the decisions and adapting to climate change, and they're going to be our next tribal staff that are going to be working on these things. And so Indian education is one aspect as well that we work in. Another aspect of the tribal engagement plan, it talks about providing resources for tribes and tribal staff. And so there's some tools out there on funding databases and lists on where you can go in and search for different funding opportunities and grants and things like that. One really good one that I like and use often is the Pacific Northwest Tribal Climate Change Network Funding Guide. And it's this really cool tool where I even recommend it to you guys, even if you're not tribal staff, go in and search for a word and find grants that are available. This is a really cool resource for things like that and very useful for the tribes. And then also contact lists, who do I contact for different aspects? Is it drought? Is it landscape conservation cooperative? How do I partner with all these different agencies and what are their different roles and things like that? So we're looking at providing those types of resources and what other types of resources might be useful for the tribal staff. We also see this as very beneficial to both entities. It's not a one-way street. We're not just tossing things over the fence to the tribal staff and saying, here, hope you use it, hope it's useful type thing. This is really a two-way street between the tribes and the climate science centers and our partners. For the tribes, for instance, it might be beneficial for them to have access to the science for their specific issues and circumstances that they're dealing with on their land. It's a way for them to make better decisions for their treaty and trust resources. And it's an opportunity to share their knowledge of what they're seeing and how they've adapted and how they're practicing sustainable land management principles in their region. And then, of course, for the climate science centers, one of the big key terms that we've heard a lot in the last 2 days is listen and learn. To really listen to these tribes and what they're dealing with, and making our research useful to the community so they can make good decisions. Right? Exchange of place-based knowledge and Western science. These tribes are seeing things on their lands and living it, and so understanding what's going on in a certain place. The long-term monitoring, observation, reporting of local manifestations. Many of the tribes are monitoring and seeing these things on their lands, so they have the ability. And then discussions of priorities and future projects and things like that as well. So there's a lot. It's beneficial to both groups. Some of the types of things that we've done in the first 2 years is we hosted the American Indian Alaska Native Climate Change Working Group. We hosted the American Indian Math and Science Society Summer Institute last summer, which is a youth camp. We attended and presented at the EPA National Tribal Science Council, which their two main top priorities are TEK and climate change. And so they have really taken the lead on many of these issues. I've done things with the Norman Public Schools and the Native American Science Club type things and activities. We worked with the 8 Northern Indian Pueblos Environmental Summer Camp, and then we had our intertribal workshops on climate variability and change last summer as well. So another aspect of working with the tribes is right in our mission statement, there's this challenging phrase of natural and cultural resources, that we're supposed to be working on not just the natural, but cultural resources as well. And this becomes a very challenging concept for us. And I want to take a few minutes and explain that. And one aspect of it is how do we define cultural resources? This is the definition from the National Park Service. So tangible and intangible, so living and dead, and represent people's cultures, human activities, and events. So that's just one example of how cultural resources can be defined. And there are lots of others out there. So this becomes very challenging for environmental and natural resource groups in that it includes things such as social elements, and not just the past, but present and future. It's beyond the artifacts and the archaeology. It's beyond the living and spiritual aspect. It includes things like cultural tourism and economics. And again, that sensitivity and propriety information as well. So this becomes a challenge for natural and cultural, and natural resource groups such as you guys, that this encourages us to reach out of our normal types of groups that we work with and consider other types of groups, whether it's engaging with cultural keepers, elders, historic preservation officers, healers, or maybe even artists that include the oral and visual and textural aspects of cultural resources, including other types of scholars and working with them, whether it's the social scientists, the ethnobotanists, historians, and many others that this can include. So this is a huge challenge to environmental staff that typically don't work with these types of groups. And there's this disconnect between environmental and cultural resources, and how do we bring those groups together and create this dialogue and start seeing where the overlaps are and how we can work together. And they might work together on these types of things, such as defining cultural resources, recognizing and identifying cultural resources, developing tools to protect, and determining how environmental changes are affecting our cultural resources, and then again, preserving and managing cultural resources, these types of things. So again, as Renee and mentioned, we have an RFP process that we fund projects as well. And so we've currently funded a few tribal projects. One is the impact of climate change on flows in the Red River Basin. And this is a project where we're taking the global climate models and downscaling them. And this is Derek and Carlos working on this, and then putting them into a hydrological model, and then into the Chickasaw Choctaw Nation water plan. And they're going to be making adaptation strategies and things like that on how to plan for climate science. So that's one project that's been funded. The other project is the Intertribal Workshops on Climate Variability and Change. And this is Paulette Blanchard's project that she will be talking about on Wednesday at lunch. And there's a video that you'll see on that as well. So some of the trainings and types of things that we have coming up, we've partnered with NOAA Risha Skip, the Southern Climate Impact Planning Program for our region, and we're doing Climate 101 workshops for tribal staff. We also are developing a GIS course on environmental problem solving. As well, other types of training. We're hosting the Institute of Tribal Environmental Professionals and their climate adaptation training and bringing to Norman. We're also, if you're not familiar with the National Conservation Training Center, they have lots of different climate trainings, and one of their trainings is a vulnerability assessment. This one is on species vulnerability, which species are vulnerable and how adaptable are they, and we're bringing that to our region. And then another one example is we're doing climate science grant writing workshops. So that's just a few of the types of trainings that we're currently working on this year and developing. And then I just threw this in, so some possible discussion topics if you're interested in contacting us on how do we frame climate science research questions, defining these natural and cultural resources, and how do we integrate the cultural into the technical and scientific research, and what are some of the first projects or low-hanging fruit type things. So feel free to contact us on those types of things as well. And there's my contact information. Thank you.